hospitals in Missouri, you can send your staff to. He implied much humor in it. That's what you said earlier tonight.
Creative problem solving.
Yeah. Oh. Print that.
Still can't see what's jumping that up. T-shirt out there, says that.
Okay, it's 5:30. Welcome everybody to the August 13th budget meeting, and we will start with roll call, please.
Fitzwater.
Here.
Graham.
Here.
Hensley.
Here.
Hussey.
Here.
Kimna.
Here.
Mahalovich.
Here.
Prather.
Here.
Schreiber.
Here.
Ward.
Here.
Wiseman.
Okay, thank you. This time we'll move into committee discussion of the budget and call on Carlos Graham.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Margie in regards to, I know we had talked about the track phone settlement. How much is that settlement are we expecting to be returned?
It's about $122,828. That is the $250,000 less some actual cost, and then 50% it goes to the attorneys and 50% to the city.
And is that something that's going to be returned to us during this fiscal year, or will this be for next fiscal year?
We expect to have that payment in fiscal year 2018.
So this year?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I would like to ask that we direct staff to create an ordinance to purchase 4 police vehicles out of that track phone money, and that would be for this fiscal year here. And I would entertain that as a motion.
Okay, that it's been moved.
Second.
It's been seconded by Councilman Schreiber. Discussion. Any council discussion on this motion? Councilman Hussey.
Just for clarity's sake, this is not a motion to make any changes to the budget. You're just spending the money. So you're really just directing staff to draft an ordinance that'll have to come to a council meeting over 2 meetings and be voted on at that level.
That is fine.
Correct.
Any other discussion?
But this is something that is going to be returned back to us in this fiscal year, and I hope that we're all trying to find ways to get police some cars, and I think this could be a possible way that we could do it. But certainly I look forward to having that discussion with each and every one of you.
All right, thank you. Any other? Councilman Fitzwater?
I don't disagree with the intent. Is this the time to, I guess my question is this the time to do that, or should we make sure that everything is on the table? I'm not disagreeing that that's a priority. I just wonder if we want to start the meeting there, or if we want to make sure we've got everything in line before we make that motion.
I would think yes, Councilman, since we're going to go into talking about 2019 budget, and I'm talking about what we can do right now for 2018, and then we can pick up on the 2019 budget.
You know, I would have to agree, and Mrs. Miller, you might be able to elaborate that the monies that we would receive from the track phone would be considered revenues for 2018 and not 2019, is that correct?
That's correct.
Any other discussion? Okay, this time we will proceed with roll call, please.
Fitzwater.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Hensley.
Aye.
Hussey.
Aye.
Kimna.
Aye.
Mahalovich.
Aye.
Prather.
Aye.
Schreiber.
Aye.
Ward. Wiseman.
Okay. It passes, and so at this time, we have, the motion was to pass to purchase 4 police cars with the track phone money to simplify things. And the mayor is here, I would just, if she would like to say a word or two.
Hi there, sorry I'm late. Anyway, I do want to say on budget night that it's Ryan Molman's birthday, so we have birthday cookies for you. Happy birthday, Ryan. And I won't make you sing, council, but happy birthday. You can share if you want to.
Did you have anything else?
No, that's fine, thank you at this time, and I'll look forward to hearing the discussion about the motion on the table.
Okay, well,
Thanks.
that motion's been passed. We're moving on
Oh,
to
that's right.
other motions or budget items. Councilman Mahalovich.
As we heard from Parks and Rec the other day, last meeting, they will have a commission meeting tomorrow, I believe, to discuss the budget items and reaffirm, I guess, whatever they're going to send back to us. And while it's premature to act on the Parks and Rec budget in any kind of way, I would like to send a message that way that I think that we should pull out the debt service payment of $1,060,000 as a time when we need to consider that with our legal staff and our finance folks independently of our budget, so as not to obligate or to appear to obligate us for that amount of money well into the future. So I would, I'm going to make a motion to remove the debt service payment from the Parks and Rec budget.
Is there a second? Okay,
I mean, I guess I can second for the sake of conversation at least.
okay, we'll second for the sake of
I mean,
conversation.
that means it's second for the motion, we'll vote on it, but
Okay,
if I can have the floor for a minute,
Councilman
then-
Hussey, you go ahead.
I guess I'm just curious. I understand the intent here, and I apologize I was not here for the park discussion last week. Is this motion something that the commission or the park director would be expecting this evening? This sort of action? I mean, I guess the rationale, I certainly want, I mean, this is kind of a substantive change to their budget. I certainly wouldn't want to catch them off guard that it'll appear that the council stripped out the debt service payment of a budget. Is your intent really just to take it out for further conversation with the potential to add back in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we don't have an opinion from our legal office. We don't have opinion from our finance director with regard to the impact of this, and ultimately, we are held responsible for the payment of this debt service. As I understand it, it was brought forward to us as a placeholder for us to have a discussion about it. Our short discussion the other night said that clearly we'll have to have this conversation with legal staff, we'll have to have this conversation with finance before we would really enter into a contract. So I don't believe this is, I think it's a good time just to focus on their budget at hand, and then when we come to the debt service and the financing of that, then we will have that discussion. I would yield any clarification I need from legal counsel and our finance.
Councilman Hussey?
I guess I understand the intent to that end. I guess I just wonder if taking this action is truly necessary this evening, unless you feel like there's the chance we're going to finish the budget this evening. I don't know the time frame that it would take for us to get legal opinion, financial opinion, to be comfortable with the inclusion of this within their budget to that point with debt service. Is that something that realistically could be done before we finalize a budget this budget cycle, or do you anticipate needing yourself more time that might stretch into fiscal year 2019?
Let me yield to our legal staff to how do these things work out, and to what degree the vetting occurs through our finance on this.
If the debt service payment were included in the budget, last week I indicated that including that portion in the parks budget does not obligate the city to issue any type of obligation, a bond or note of any type. So the actual obligation instrument itself would have to get approved by the city council when it gets approved. Speaking from just my experience, there's been preliminary discussions on types of financing available and generally how much you can raise with different types of money set aside for debt service, but there certainly hasn't been any project specified, and there hasn't been any type of analysis of the market specific to any type of obligation that I'm aware of. So you rely on your municipal financial advisors and bond counsel to give you that deep dive into the details of any type of debt issuance, and we haven't gone there yet. We don't know. So this, if included within the budget, would merely be a placeholder. But it doesn't obligate the city in any way to actually issue that obligation, that debt. So we're really kind of still in the beginning stages of any specific type of financing, but at the same time, I think it's probably a worthwhile exercise to at least start exploring how that could impact budget. I guess I'm ambivalent as to whether or not it would be included within this budget or held on to for a supplemental appropriation out of the parks. Fund balance. Thank you. With a risk-averse approach, saying don't fund it, don't approve it, don't appropriate it until you're ready to fund it. That would probably be the most conservative way to approach it, is to not include it within the budget until you have a lot more information as to exactly what that obligation is going to be. But it's not really moving the needle for me either way.
Does finance have a comment or any on this issue?
I have a question before she answers that. Is part of the assumption on being able to pay back this debt service include the capital improvement sales tax that we allot to them every year, that we give them a certain percentage? Is it automatically including that? Because I know that hasn't traditionally been automatic. So I wanted that to be in there. Because if we approve this, then we were pretty much saying, well, from now on, we're just going to give them that money and no questions asked.
Mr. Spalding provided a forecast document during his budget presentation last Thursday, and as part of that, at the end of the document, on the second page, it is showing the proceeds from the sales tax G and possibly H and so on as a funding source, or as a means to help pay for the debt service.
Okay, so it is included in there. I guess Ryan had to
Yes.
answer that question. If we're somewhat obligated, if we approve that funding, and that was their intent, to use that money that we have not given them approval from in future sales tax for them to use.
So, in any given year, there would have to be an individual appropriation of the amount. You can't appropriate the money now and have that carry forward for the life of the bond. So, a bond of this type would be subject to annual appropriation, and so every single year, the city council would have to make a decision to fund the debt service payment. Now, if you don't fund the debt service payment, that can be negatively impactful on your credit rating. But every single year, it would take a new action to go ahead and say, we're going to pull out the money from whatever funding source and apply that to debt service.
Okay, so basically you're saying that the monies that we would be using, say this year, for funding would come out of the sales tax, or this current, it's F, I believe, this is sales tax. We would somewhat indirectly committing the council to future funding of that as a resource, because if they didn't use it, that's figured into the repayment of that loan or that bonding. And if they didn't have that money to repay it, then it would adversely affect the city because we're putting our credit on line.
I think that's a fair characterization.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Councilman Graham?
Going back to last week's meeting, what did Todd say that his monies were as it relates to from the sales tax that he generates every year? Did he say $5 or $6 million a year?
It's in the 2019 budget is $5,250,000.
$5,250,000, and that's not
That's
set
the
to
sales tax
sunshine?
revenue. That's not the sales tax G. That's not the capital improvement sales tax.
Okay.
That's the regular sales
Regular
tax.
sales tax, okay. 5.2. Okay.
Councilman Malovich?
There's a lot, we could probably talk about this bond financing for quite a bit, and that was what I was trying to avoid. So, given the ambivalence of our legal staff, I could withdraw that motion, and we can pass 1.1 million, and I'm not sure what we're doing with it, but we'll have that discussion later, I guess, right? So I can withdraw that motion.
The second withdrawal? Okay. All right. We're back to square one. Is there any comment on the budget as it stands? Anyone want to add to the parking lot? I'm not going to go from department to department, so because I think that would be unfair to put departments over other departments during the budget. So, Councilman Hussey?
Just a quick question, Mr. Chairman. If I correct on the rules, we might make a motion to add something to the parking lot that it's an expenditure. The assumption is not that we have an offset necessarily tonight. If that was offered at the same time, that's acceptable, but
Correct.
it doesn't need to be a package deal. All right.
Correct.
Well-
Except I would add that it needs to be in, not by this Thursday, but the next budget meeting after that.
No, and I've got some thoughts on offset. I just want to process through things correctly. So I would make a motion to increase the funding for the Human Relations Commission from $500 to the requested $5,000.
Second.
Okay, moved, seconded, discussion?
I would just add that I know there's been a lot of discussion about the commissions and a desire maybe for a more uniform process in the future on how they propose, their funding request and what that looks like. I have seen what the chair has suggested. I think it's a commission that's doing good work. They may not have it down to the penny as to how they're going to spend that money, but I don't think the expectation should be that they're that specific because they have ideas on things they want to do. It's a committed group. I feel like this amount of money gives them something to focus on for the year. And then we can kind of evaluate how it worked, their successes, and if that funding is extended next year. So I at least make the motion to throw out to their submitted request.
Okay, comments? Any other comments? Councilman Fitzwater?
Are we having better luck getting participation quorums at the meetings?
Yes, the ones that I've been at. I think they just had that one meeting they really struggled. They had 2 members that had some health issues, but they met last month with the full quorum. They're meeting again this Friday and expect the same. And so I think the engagement has been there. I think they just had a month or 2 of events sort of coincidental happening where, I mean, unfortunately I have 2 members going through some cancer treatments right now that have prevented them from making some of those meetings, but I think last month they had success. I wasn't at that meeting, and I know that the group itself is pushing forward, and a lot of work's happening even offline, by email sometimes to get things going, and they report back out, so.
I have a question. On the dollar amount that you came to, is there a particular reason why you chose that amount?
That's the request from the chairman and the commission themselves, and so I'm just kind of
Do
honoring.
you think that they can get us, we have a lot of commissions out there that are probably deserving too, but I would hope that they'd be able to come up with a budget as how they're going to be spending that money. And we're going to give them until next Thursday. Maybe they can come up with something?
I believe so. I believe they have some formal documentation that was submitted by the chairman throughout that process. Again, I don't think it's necessarily going to be itemized to say $75 on this and $500 on this, because some of it's still to be known for educational programs, speakers, these sorts of things. I would add that, we've funded the cultural arts commissions in the past, and it's a little vague in that funding as well sometimes. They give these awards out for particular projects, and so, I think there's probably some clarity and some detail that can come. I certainly wouldn't hold them to the same level of specificity that you might hold a department director to, because there's a lot of unknown for them. And this gives them the opportunity then to at least say, we've got some funds, now we can go recruit that speaker, host that program, hold that training, these sorts of things.
Yeah, that's great. And a little more thought into the funding portion, it would be great if we could get some ideas as to what they're going to be spending on. Maybe they don't need 5, maybe they could use 2 or 3. That would be great to have an idea as to what they're going to be spending on. Councilwoman Ward?
I do know that they've already have had a proven track record of hitting the ground running and being successful. They've already partnered with the Board of Realtors for their affordable housing program that they do. They also had an event downtown with a writers group that had a lot of local and state officials who attended. And they're also planning a lot of trainings and partnering with the schools and the city. So I think it's going to be hard for them to pinpoint, okay, this speaker, this speaker, this speaker, and not knowing how much a speaker charges. So with this, they're hopeful to fundraise also, but I don't want to put that burden on a commission because people who donate cannot use it for a tax write-off. So you have that kind of trouble that you might get into if you're fundraising and the people that give don't realize that they can't use it. So I was just hopeful, and like what Ken said, that they can have a little bit of better foundation to start without having to focus and educate on fundraising. So.
Any other? Mrs. Strope?
If you don't mind, I just wanted to point out in the pink sheet item for this amount I did ask for some information from the commission and they submitted it for the pink sheet. So the justification is written in, although it is still very generic, does say that the amount would be used to bring in special speakers, facilitate writing competitions and professional development seminars and community forums. So just general information.
Thank you. Madam Mayor?
Thank you. And on that particular item, there were 3 boards and commissions that asked for funding in this budget. In prior years, it had just been the 2, and now that we have the 3rd one asking, just wanted to get some council input, and that's what this discussion is good for, and to have the council liaisons weigh in, which they have. And we have 23 city boards and commissions. So as we bring either new ones on or as the money is being asked for, some ask for 0 And then we have then, the $5,000 or $6,000 request. So just trying to find a way that's somewhat either fair or trying to figure out how council wants to approach that. Of course, not all 23 are needing funding. So Historic Preservation Commission asked for 500, like they've traditionally done, so that was the one. And then Arts Commission asked for 6,000, and Human Relations asked for 5,000. So as we went through the budget process, I said at the initial meeting when I put them all at 500 that we could have this discussion and hearing from their liaisons to just make sure that they were in communication with those boards and commissions. And the other part of it too, so we have Human Relations and Arts. Now, Human Relations, speaking of that one in particular, they had a great event, and it was sponsored by community partners, so it was not a city-funded thing, but they did have a wonderful event, and they really have hit the ground running. So, is 5,000 the right amount? And that would be up to the liaisons to help us kind of determine. They had the pink sheet item for speakers, and if the community would come forward and help partner, that would be helpful too. On the other hand, Arts Commission has been fundraising through their foundation, so they've been doing that for quite some time. So I think that's why council was more favorable in past years about funding the Arts Commission, because they've been doing some very heavy-duty fundraising over the years, and they established a foundation to do that, so they asked for 6,000. If the Human Relations Commission were to fundraise, it wouldn't be tax deductible, so, they could, but it would certainly be something that if they wanted to fundraise in the future, we might have to decide what that should look like and how that can be done, because I think there is community interest. It was shown with their first event that they have community partners interested in seeing that commission do good work and thrive in the community. So with the Arts Commission, although I know the motion on the table is for Human Relations, but as we're looking at commissions as a whole, Arts Commission recently moved under the Parks Department, I believe in the last year. So I did mention at the last meeting that maybe we would talk with Parks as well and see how we want to handle that. Speaking with Director Spalding, he said he would be willing to, I asked would he split the cost. We have 6,000 in their requested item. If the city did 3, would Parks do 3? And so that we could split that item. And he was favorable to that, of course, pending council decision and pending their commission as well. But that's the way to look at that in the future. So having the broad conversation of should all city boards be funded, if they make a request, or how do we handle that when they make requests? Because another example is Environmental Quality Commission is under Parks. They haven't asked for money yet, but they've also certainly been doing a lot of big picture projects in the community. So just to be prepared for when other commissions ask, and whether it's through Parks or through city on some of those other commissions that are under Parks. So I know that was a long drawn out explanation, but certainly I'm glad to see that council is supportive and that the liaisons are supportive of that as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, looks like we're ready to vote. Roll call, please.
Graham,
Aye.
Hensley,
Aye.
Hussey.
Aye.
Kimna,
Aye.
Mahalovich.
Aye.
Prather.
Aye.
Schreiber.
Aye.
Ward.
Aye.
Wiseman.
Aye.
Fitzwater.
Aye.
Well, it passes, so it's been added to the parking lot. Councilwoman Ward?
I think it's appropriate now to go into the Cultural Arts Commission. I too spoke with Director Spalding regarding splitting that $6,000 budget item. I also had a conversation too with the commission chair on that, and he was also favorable to that. So I would like to put $3,000 from the city up on the parking lot for cultural arts.
Second.
There's been motion and a second. Discussion, please?
No, they asked for 6, so it would be 3,000.
$3,000 is the amount. Is discussion? Any more discussion on this? Councilman Mahalovich.
The Cultural Arts Commission was very favorable towards an event we had honoring Thomas Jefferson, and put in money on that, as well as the city of Jefferson, as well as several other community groups, and I think it was a major success because of the partnerships we had and the co-sponsorships that leveraged a little bit of money and made it a very nice event. For those that were able to attend, I think they would agree.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, we are ready to vote. Roll call, please.
Hensley.
Aye.
Hussey.
Aye.
Kimna.
Aye.
Mahalovich.
Aye.
Prather.
Aye.
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 All right.
Okay. Passes.
Sheila,
So it's another
proposed was
$3,000 to
500,
the parking lot.
not 4,500.
We've got,
They already have 500 in the budget, so this budget will increase by
Oh, you're right, for the
45.
increase. I'm sorry, not proposed in
and
the budget.
this will increase by
Okay,
2,500.
Thank you.
Okay, so at this time, we're accepting any other motions or discussion.
Well,
Councilman Hussey.
it's not a motion just yet. Not to show all my cards, but personally, I think a place to find some of these dollars is from that MSP funding. And I say that because we haven't totally spent the current fiscal year. It seems as though outside counsel could potentially be paid out of other funding sources. And so, to show my cards, that may be a place this week or next meeting or whatever that I look to try to offset some of this, unless somebody else has some recommendations as well. And I would say that my preference probably on the Jefferson Day funding would be to say if there's a desire to see funding for a specific event like that and cultural arts is going to be involved, I'd rather use Cultural Arts Commission for that funding mechanism as opposed to calling it out by a line item specifically like that. I get a little leery about when maybe we specify specific events like that in line item budgets. Since they were engaged in it already, I'd almost rather see that packaged together as opposed to having it be so specific, but I don't necessarily need to make a motion on that tonight. I'm just expressing some thoughts.
Madam Mayor, did you have?
I could go over that a little bit more, and I brought some handouts here. Let's start here. There's two on each page. See how many you want. So here's 3 for this table. I have this electronic too, so I can make sure we get it so Nicole or anyone else can have it too. So this is more detailed information about MSP. The first sheet is from last year. It's what we passed out. It's the one that has the 2017 on the top. So that one has, I just wanted to provide what we had last year so everybody has that in front of them as well. Because at the time, CVB was also looking at the restroom trailer concept, which is on the bottom. But I'm going to start with this year, which is the sheet that says it has the picture of MSP on the front of it. So this just outlines the last 3 years. So in 2016, we had $15,000. $5,000 was a lighting improvement that we made, which was a cost share between the city, state, county, and CVB. When we added some significant electrical and lighting. And then the $10,000 was for masonry work. And then in 2017, we had set aside $20,000. And I apologize, I put a 0. I didn't put the $20,000 was what we'd originally budgeted. You can see that on the previous page, but $20,000, so we did not spend that in 2017. So that didn't carry over. We'd kind of set it aside during the budget process, thinking that if they were to do some of these projects, we would use that to cost share. Since we did not spend it, it did not carry over. The current year, fiscal year, we have $20,000 that was approved last year. And as you can see, last year when CVB had suggested either lighting improvements or the public restroom, they went with the lighting improvements. And so that's what's pictured on this year's sheet. So the lighting improvements, you see the two bases here that the lighting, these two were built, the stone platforms, and Councilman Schreiber probably knows more details about that. This is currently under construction and should be completed by the end of the month for some historic lighting that was taken from the original prison that has now been put back, that will be used to improve the lighting. So a lot of tours, of course, and especially evening tours that come and go through the prison, bringing that historic piece back. So that project is around $58,000 that you see here. So our $20,000 would go towards that project. So the CVB will be invoicing us as soon as they get invoiced. So last year's budgeted amount will be put towards this. So for the future, we can set it aside for potential projects, whether it's, I know some had mentioned the legal counsel, or whether it's projects. Diane had outlined on the bottom of the page other CVB future projects that she had mentioned, adding another entrance or exit door for visitors, restrooms, or there is a discussion about buried cells that would be unearthed as well. So those are some future projects. The reason they had kind of put the restroom concept on hold was knowing that we're moving forward with the state and with redevelopment, that perhaps that money would be better spent on a permanent restroom rather than a temporary one. So that kind of shows how they've arrived at those projects.
So clarification, fiscal year 18 has already been, money is already tied up. It's going to be.
Yes, even though we haven't actually spent that, they'll be invoicing us. They should be invoiced this month.
The
And
entire
so
20,000
for
will be
the
gone.
entire, even though they knew the last year we did not use that, this year they know that they have indicated that they would like to use that.
All right.
And I have to say, they have been very careful. They haven't just been spending it to spend it, which is evident in the 2017 year. And that was also for us, that if we had a project at MSP that we thought would be, that we would want to use that on, but they are not just spending it to spend it. They're being very careful to make sure it's spent on projects that are for the betterment of the tours, which in turn increases revenue to the city, because they know that draws people here. So they really want to make sure and pinpoint projects. I mean, they're spending money on the MSP all the time, but they want to pinpoint projects that benefit the city and the community for our investment in that.
Right. Thank you. Councilman Hussey?
So if I'm reading your documentation correctly, there is not a specific project outlined for 2019 yet.
Correct. The bottom of the page outlines
Just some
possible.
speculative things.
Similar to last year where they outlined
So-
two, they outlined either the lighting or the restrooms.
So I guess to the council, my preference actually, in light of this information, might actually be to zero this out and talk to the CVB to say, look, if projects come up throughout the year that make sense for the city to be a partner to, bring us the project and the funding mechanisms, and we can deal with it then, and make a decision, as opposed to sort of allocating the 20 and their match and sort of having that set aside. It seems as though the better option may be to tackle these things on a project by project basis, and we make a determination that it makes sense to move forward with funding that, or if it's things that CVB feel like they can accommodate with the funds they have based on tour revenue and those sorts of things. But I'll be curious what other council may think before any motions are made.
Other comments? Councilman Schreiber?
One of the things that has to be considered on these projects is that we do have to work closely with facilities management, the Office of Administration. So, it's not that we've been looking at and meeting in regard to which would be the best option, the permanent restrooms or the portable restrooms as well. And the entrance is probably pretty high on our priority list, because we now have so many tours that there's actually a bottleneck getting in and out, and so but that would also have to go before facilities management and Kathy Brown over there as well. So, but that's pretty high on the priority list, and that would require some landscaping issues, as well as some grading and things like that to make it safe, as well as some additional lighting, and certainly anything that we can do to improve the overall aesthetic value of the entrance to the prison. It's certainly going to also help to enhance the federal courthouse and that whole area down through there. So, as far as which one of these projects would be actually done, the historic lighting itself, the lights had to be, a restoration had to be done on them, and they were the original Art Deco lights that stood at the entrance, the drive entrance to the prison. They're about 4 feet high, and so they're the same lights that they used as the basis for the lighting that's done on the Chestnut Street and down here on the expressway. So, that's why that project took a while, because by the time you got electricians involved and you got the restoration company and Office of Administration and everything like that, well, they were kind enough to let us be able to use those lights, which I had moved from the old prison to the new prison, and quite honestly, we intended to use them at the new prison, but that didn't work out. So that's why we were able to obtain those lights.
Thank you. Councilman Hussey?
I certainly don't want this to be taken as though I'm not supportive of the prison and what it does for this community. I do look at it to say that the CVB receives the revenue, and there's a funding stream to them based on prison tours, and I know that the revenues above and beyond the expenses kind of get poured back into marketing and the prison itself. I do get constituent feedback sometimes in conversation that says, well, why is the city putting money into a state property? And I think with the development and the opportunity with the recently conveyed property next door, that it kind of gets blurred. And I think moving forward for some of us, it could be that if there's dollars coming out of the city funds towards MSP, that they may be more appropriately spent on, development contracts, the process there, the counsel that it takes to develop the acreage that we've just received and grow that, because that's been land conveyed to the city. I do wonder at times, and I get those questions, and maybe others do as well, that says, well, why are we spending money on a state property? That just doesn't make sense. And so I know we can sit here, debate, and take different angles. I'm just expressing certainly where I come from. It's a tight budget. There are certainly a lot of priorities and some hard decisions to be made. I look at this as a place that maybe some cuts could be made.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And Councilman Hussey, when you ask why, I think one good answer is when we think of the exponential growth in people that are coming to our community for tours, and knowing that they're hitting about that 35 or 34,000 number, and they started with 3,000, and then even the museum itself that went from like 1,800 to 8,000 in like 3 or 4 years. Like, we're seeing exponential growth in people coming here, so then they're eating in our restaurants and shopping and staying here in our community, and as well as they visit from around. So that could be a good why when you're asked that question, or when any of us are asked. But perhaps there could be, maybe there's a way to look at this line item and think of a compromise. Maybe, we have 2 things on the parking lot, that what if we were to say, instead of 20, maybe we do 10 and then fund these items. There's not another source for those 2 items up there. And mainly, this item for MSP is, it's nice to have it in there more symbolically that we're a partner in the project, because a lot of these items we're not funding the entirety of it. The CVB is, or the state, or both. All these items, like the one from 2016 was a cost share. There was a significant larger amount. The amount of electrical work that was over $80,000, and we put in 10 to that item, or the 5 and 10, we put in 15 that year to projects that were over 80,000, and this year we would be putting in a portion, 20,000 that would be over projects that are over 60,000. So we're more of a smaller portion, and the projects, it's more of just being a partner in them. So, perhaps we could say, take that down to 10 and then fund the two items that you have on the parking lot. As a compromise, I'm just throwing that out as an idea.
Councilman Fitzwater.
Well, just to speak on the issue, I like the 20,000. I think it sends a message. It's in the grand scheme of things, a minimal dollar amount. We just put 40% of that amount in the parking lot for two commissions. I think we've got some commitments there. It's an incredibly important part of town. This year we saw where we had a project come up where we needed all of the funds. I definitely hate taking it back to zero, because then it has to compete against everything just to get recognition. This way it's got at least some funding background. So, I would support leaving it where it's at. I think it's a critical project that as we move forward, and I think we ought to put dollars where we need to put them.
Right, thank you. Other discussion? Councilman Schreiber.
Going back to the several years ago, it's true that the historic buildings are owned by the state. But as was stated by the mayor, the economic impact is not being realized by the state. It's being realized by the businesses in the city. And the state was willing to, they saw the significance of what we were trying to do with the tours when we first started them. So the state came across and put up several $1 million so that 3 of the main buildings that are used for the tours would have new roofs. They put up $2.5 million for 50-year roofs. So that's a lot of money. And if they had not done that, then I can guarantee you we would not be having the tours because of the shape that those roofs were in. So, it's been a partnership, and they've done their part. And so it doesn't bother me a bit that we are willing to put in some funds for this project, because we're the ones that are realizing the economic advantage that it has for our community and the businesses within our community.
Thank you. Other discussion? Seeing that there was no,
And I don't know if Marge has the answer to this question, but the monies that they receive for the tours, like, that money goes to where?
Oh, that's all CVB.
It's all CVB. Does anyone know what that
Most of it
additional
goes
money
back
is used for?
into they reinvest it into the site, which is where all these projects are.
All of it
from.
goes back into?
Yeah. Of course, with exponential growth comes costs. Of course, they're bringing the revenues in, but certainly the cost, there are several, as we know, the MSP redevelopment group recently had a tour, and as you get out there and see, you really do start to see the improvements that could be made. And when you think about it, of how many people are coming there, it's certainly, there is a lot of potential for even more and for more improvements as that grows, and especially as we're making the investment in the rest of the area.
Councilman Hussey.
And I hate to open up the conversation, but it leads me to believe that does there need to be a more thorough conversation about the CVB budget in regards to this? That's an entity that receives the lodging tax dollars, which I look at as being city tax dollars. Those are dollars collected within the city. They receive the revenue from the tours. I know they contribute as a partner, but are we viewing them as a partner from the city perspective? Are we viewing them as a different partner, not the city? Because then you could argue that, the city is partnering twice. I'm not trying to discount the need to partner in the importance of this building, this not building, but site for tourism and these sorts of things. I'm just expressing that I get some pushback at times to say, why are you spending dollars on somebody else's property? And the second one is that, while it's a large budget in the grand scheme of things, it's not much. There's a lot of things that we could say are not much, but still have deserve attention and need. I'm just trying to say, some of the time we're going to stack some of these things up against each other and say, well, what's more important, this vehicle or that vehicle, this item or that item? And I think it's at least just worthy of conversation, because it is one of while it's not much money, it's a high-profile expenditure that a lot of people have strong opinions about, and whether or not city tax dollars go in any way, shape, or form towards the structure itself.
Madam Mayor.
You're exactly right. It's high profile, and I think that's the reason that it's in the budget. At least that's why I included it in the mayor's budget, because it certainly is high profile and high priority, and we're very thankful to finally have the deed. It's something that over the last 3 years, we've at least allocated something, whether it was spent or not, we at least took it more of the symbolic support. I want to make it really clear that the CVB did not ask for this. They are not coming to the city saying, would you please partner with us? So this is not coming from the CVB. They are thankful that we are partnering with them, but it's certainly not something that they have asked us to do. It's something that we are taking the partnership approach that, yes, that is state property, that the CVB runs the successful tours, but it is in our city, and it is a very large piece of economic development and growth. So that's the perspective we're taking, is simply to show our support and partnership as we're working through this very high profile and very well received and very anticipated project. So that's really the main reason of where it's coming from.
Councilman Mahalovich.
I sit on that CVB as your liaison, and I appreciate the conversation, and I'll carry that back to them. I will say their meetings have an accountant at each meeting, and they go through a thorough accounting of the dollars that go towards the CVB in general and to the tours specifically. And by agreement, I believe they're required to put money back into that facility. So it is a very well-ran organization, and you're not questioning that, I know. And I would, they're obligated to announce, give an annual update, and I think those are good questions they'll have ready for the annual update. But I would say that probably this land wouldn't have been conveyed to us had it not been for the amount of plowing back of city funds, CVB funds into that property. And I wish I had the PowerPoint that was provided to the General Assembly members, but it showed a large amount of money that we were reinvesting in that, and I think that was a big reason why they conveyed the property to us, and now it's up to us to figure out what to do from here. But I'll be glad to convey any concerns, not in a hostile way. I understand how they're represented, but I think they would welcome the conversation and the discussion.
All right, thank you. Any other discussion? And this was just a discussion. We did not have a motion, so we can continue this, or if there's any other thing that you guys want to bring up to discuss, parking lot issues, whatever, now's the time. Councilman Hussey.
I just want to say that I know that Councilman Graham's motion earlier added 4 police vehicles. There was 2 in the budget already, so it gets to 6, but there was 14 requested. I think I still have a desire to see if there's a way to add more. I just throw that out there. I think that's worthy of some more conversation.
Councilman Hensley.
Thank you. And on that exact point, I think it helps me anyway to look at all of our vehicles sort of collectively and look where the greatest need is and try to address the greatest need first. And while now there are 6 police vehicles potentially covered through Councilman Graham's motion and through the mayor's budget, looking through the items that have been funded in the budget, I've identified 4 vehicles that have been scheduled for funding right now that appear to either be low miles, occasional use, none of which appear to be in any sort of critical state, that I think could be better, the funds for which could be put, I think, better towards 6 more vehicles. The total value of these 4 vehicles is about $192,000. The cost of 6 police vehicles is over $184,000, so it's more than covered. This being my first rodeo with the parking lot, I don't know if I'm required to bring each one of them up individually or if I could put them forward as a slate for discussion, but I'd be happy to do. I guess I'll point out and page numbers in the budget may be the easiest way to identify them. On page 192, there's a planning and protective services inspection vehicle that's $25,000. On page 248, there's a snow plow. On page 315, there's a 3/4 ton truck. And on page 321, there's a pump machine truck. And again, total value, or total cost estimated on those items is about $192,000. And if it's acceptable in this format, I would propose putting those on the lot in exchange for 6 more police vehicles at $30,700 apiece. And then there will be some change left over.
Mrs. Miller, did you have anything?
Two of the vehicles identified are through the general fund. The replace the inspection vehicle at $25,000 and the snowplow only truck at $72,000. But the other pieces of equipment you've identified are from other funding sources, particularly wastewater. So
Thank you.
that's not available to
Okay.
fund
Yeah, thank you
police
for that
vehicles.
clarification.
Yes, thanks. Then I would say it's $97,000 between those two vehicles. I'd say put those two up in exchange for 3 more police vehicles. And I would present that as a motion.
Okay, you're presenting a motion for the expense and revenue side, or you're just gonna do one of the, it's up to you. If you wanna make 2 motions, you can, make it in one, you can. It's however you prefer.
I can make it as one?
That's
Okay.
your prerogative, however you like to do it.
Thanks. The inspection vehicle and the snowplow vehicle, remove the funding and add funding for 3 police vehicles.
Second that motion.
Move to second. Now, for discussion, please. Councilman Hussey.
Just have a question. I think that the one vehicle is a inspection vehicle for 25,000. I noticed it's a 2005 with 89,000. Mr. Sanders, I believe that's your department. Is there something that is a red flag about this vehicle in particular that requires its replacement right now?
I am not that familiar with this particular vehicle at that level of detail. I believe what we would do is we would let Mr. Smith pick the worst vehicle in the fleet, throw that one out, and we get a new one in and kind of cycle them through. I think that's normally how it works, but I would let Mr. Smith assist me with that answer.
I wouldn't say that there's any vehicle that I could guarantee you will not make another year. I can tell you that they are 2005. With that motion, for this particular vehicle, what I would recommend is that we take a look at the police cars coming off fleet and do as we've been talking about before. That is a potential savings there that could then get us some, we trade miles for age, or age for miles, I guess, is the appropriate way to say it. But I think that is a doable option. However, I don't like speaking for Sonny's department in that area.
I appreciate that. That was actually going to be my suggestion. It seemed like these police vehicles might have some higher miles, but they're 3 years old. It made me wonder, for the purposes of an inspection vehicle, if that actually would work, or if there's a way to repurpose some of these vehicles. So I appreciate, great minds think alike, Mr. Smith.
Comments, any other comments here? Councilman Mahalovic.
Comments. So if my math is correct, we're up to 11 police vehicles?
I think they made 9.
9.
I believe it's 9.
2 currently.
4.
Plus
4.
4, okay.
Plus 3.
Okay. And there's no anticipation of revenue from that, so we still would have the sale of those vehicles or the redistribution among the fleet. So, okay.
Okay. Oh, Councilman Fitzwater.
I'd like to hear some dialogue in addition in regards to the snowplow. I mean,
Is that one of the vehicles in this motion?
Yes.
Okay.
and we were fortunate last year, we didn't have a lot of snow. if we were to have one of those years.
Mr. Marash?
Yeah, I mean, as I had indicated in the budget meetings the other night, that's, and you're correct, it's on page 248. You know, it's always debatable. Yes, the truck is still running today. And let's see, what year is this truck? Oh, 2004. You know, it's kind of like last year, we had to mid-year replace a couple trucks because of rusted out frames and things like that. So certainly we're going to put it on the list. Doesn't mean it isn't running today, but I may, you know, turn right around and come right back to you. I mean, that's about as all I can say about it. At some point, though, you're going to have to do have to look at replacing the equipment. So.
Thank you. Madam Mayor?
And if I recall correctly, I think last year that was in the budget and we pulled that out. I don't think it was included in the mayor's. I don't remember if it was in the city administrators, but I think it was not, or it was one of the requested. So it has been out there. So it maybe never got to council to pull out. I don't have last year's or big sheet in front of me, but I feel like we just. I mean, and there's actually, that's not the only thing. There's a lot of things that do, you know, cycle several years. So I'm not saying, I'm not trying to influence, I'm just mentioning that.
Councilman Hensley?
Thank you. Yeah, and it's been said several times already, but obviously these are hard choices among all deserving priorities. I'll just note that requested police vehicles 7, 8, and 9, which are really the ones that we're talking about now, have about 126,000, about 128,000, and about 130,000 miles. These vehicles are used every day. They may not get as many years of regular service, but that really just speaks to how hard they're used when they are used by the police department. So, you know, I look at a snowplow that is admittedly quite old, but I don't see anything in the pink sheet that indicates that it's in any sort of crisis state, as opposed to 3 vehicles that are rapidly aged, just in the normal course of their wear and tear. So that's why I'm supportive of this change.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions on this particular motion? Well, seeing that we're ready to vote, roll call, please.
Hussey.
Aye.
Kimna.
Aye.
Mahalovich.
Aye.
Prather.
Aye.
Schreiber.
Aye.
Ward.
Aye.
Wiseman.
Aye.
Fitzwater.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Hensley.
Aye.
Okay, it passes, and that will be a net zero effect on our budget, I would say.
Actually, there's about a $4,800 and some change difference.
Positive, so we have.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's
The
not.
two vehicles taken off were 97,000. The 3 police vehicles is $92,100.33.
So we have about $4,800 in the positive.
Almost 4,900.
No. Okay, thank you. Councilman Hussey.
I appreciate Councilman Mahalovich's email today that spoke to the sinking fund and a desire to allocate some dollars there. I would be curious if staff, not necessarily tonight, but if conversation has been had about the 2% salary increase, and I don't want to ever assume that if it was 1.5%, I just lop a fourth off, because I know that's not how it works. But I think it might be helpful for council to at least have an understanding of, like, what does 1% look like? What does 1.5 look like? What does 2 look like? Not necessarily to provide tonight, but just so that we've got that information in front of us as we weigh these options that are often uncomfortable options of investment in staff and personnel, sometimes at the expense of the investment in the vehicles, equipment, and facilities. So if that's something that you've got readily available or could email to us at some point.
Actually, I do. I don't have the 0.5%, but in just kind of some round numbers, for every 1% pay increase for the general fund, it's $204,660, and for all funds, it's $270,352. So for general fund, 0.5% would be around that 100,000 mark.
Ms. Miller, I had a question on the salary increase, too. In the past, when we had approved that, we weren't aware that we were changing the pay ranges also at the same time. That was news to us, I think, last year. Is that right, Councilman Malovich? That they were increasing the pay ranges every time? Is that happening this time around, that we're also increasing the pay ranges along with the salary? And is there a way we can not do both?
Steve, you want to address that?
And Gail, you can jump in here. I'd say yes, the ranges move. Yes, you cannot move the ranges, but there's consequences to that. One of which is, the whole reason we did the classification and compensation plan was to be able to look at those ranges and staying competitive. So if you don't adjust the ranges, then you're not competitive, and I'm not really sure what you'd be adjusting. I mean, you obviously you can get the salaries within in those ranges, but the ranges are where we're hiring and people either at the minimum or within the range. Not a very good answer, I know, but if you don't move the ranges, we are not competitive. You lose that competitiveness.
How much are we moving the ranges? What percentage?
For this one, it's 2%. I think that's where we left that, right?
The pay increase that's in there is 2%. I don't know if there was a discussion, or a decision made about how the range changes.
Oh, what?
I don't think that we've had a discussion. Typically, we have a discussion at the staff level every year, once we know what the amount is, to kind of talk about, should we go with the complete thing. I know last year, we adjusted the ranges 1% and did the 2% pay increase, and that allowed our ranges to move a little bit to help to try to stay competitive, but also allowed individuals to move up 1% through the range.
And that's because we just did the classification and compensation adjustments then.
Now, is that a staff decision or is that a council decision? As far
I think
as
that's a council decision. I think council should make that decision.
Okay. Thank you.
But right now, you've got the 2% and that moves the ranges. If you want something different, that's a good conversation to have. I don't know what that would be. Frankly, with 2%, there's just not a whole lot of room there. I think it should be a higher percentage, and if we want to have pay for performance or some kind of merit pay, it's even an additional percentage on top of that.
Councilman Mahalovich.
Yeah, I remember we had our reclassification November 16th, 2016, that plan, and finding one said the city currently has over 50th percentile, and the finding was that we should go to the 60th percentile. At the time, the council didn't feel like we could do that with the current, but we did approve all these different ranges. So we were up and we agreed to those ranges, and we paid, it looks like here $284,000 is what my notes are. So we adjusted those ranges based on this compensation study, and now every time we give a raise, we're adjusting the ranges again. Seems counter to a study that told us that we just adjusted our ranges. The second thing of that is, and I kind of think we are competitive because we are above the 50th percentile. I mean, we wanted to move to the 60th, but I don't think that we've lost competitiveness. I don't know of any evidence to say that we're losing staff at a rate that's greater than anybody else, or but I don't know if I quite agree with that statement.
Yeah. So if I could, just a little different perspective. Certainly, competitiveness depends on your definition of that. We're not having, generally, I'd say, difficulty hiring staff. It's a fairly competitive labor market. But from my perspective, what the classification and compensation plan did was right-sized our pay plan. Some were low, some were high, some were out of whack, some were here or there. So the compensation analysis said, here's what it should be. And so all those ranges made a whole bunch of little adjustments to get to that right size. Now, The 2%, which is across the board, keeps that right-size pay plan moving, in this particular case, even a little bit less than what the CPI is. I got the numbers here to share with you if you want it. So the classification compensation plan right-sized the whole plan, and the 2% keeps that competitive. Now, you can argue about whether 50% is competitive, 50th percentile, 60th percentile, cities are higher, lower, that's granted.
Thank you. Councilman Hollidge?
Yeah, and the two things that I felt like we fell short of on the plan, the two items was the compression issue, which I don't know what the solution is to that, and the other was pay for performance. And in the mayor's letter to us, she announced that if you're going to get that, go to the pay for performance, you need about 5%. I for one think the pay for performance is a good element to add to our compensation package, as well as address compression to the extent to which you can give us advice on that. But I'm not so sure that we shouldn't readdress this in a work session or something, because there's nothing more important than compensating our staff and being competitive, but also doing all these other things to ensure that we're being accountable to our citizens. So.
Great. Thank you. Any other discussion on this topic or any other topics?
Well, yes.
Councilman Graham.
I have a question about stormwater. And I guess this question is for Matt. Matt, I was trying to find somewhere here in the budget, or maybe, about the $323,000 that we allocate each year. And I was trying to find that number. Is that still in there, or what?
I think you're talking about the half-cent capital improvement sales tax, which is, I didn't really give a presentation about. It's because it's through all the departments, and I don't know, were we going to talk about that at a separate time, or I know there's a certain allocation from the overall budget, and then what happens typically is we go back with a cash flow discussion to Margie of how to reallocate that, so just so the numbers in the end of the 5 years are all totaled up right. So I have this sheet in front of me for stormwater, for example. In the 5-year plan for stormwater is 1.8 million in this sales tax. I think I have that right. Margie might be checking me over there. But so that's roughly a little over 300,000 a year. You're correct.
Yeah, on page 338 of your budget book is the breakdown of the sales tax G funding and the projects that are approved for the FY19 budget.
Yeah. Okay.
And so the stormwater is about halfway through the page is 360,000.
So it's still the same, did nothing move. And Matt, did we spend all of the money that was allocated for this year?
Not quite yet, but we're getting ready to send out 2 projects, and then about the next month we'll advertise a couple projects. One being, and I couldn't remember when you asked me earlier, but then I remembered Mesa stormwater pipe. It's a big culvert over here off Mesa that's deteriorated, has some holes in it, was collapsing. And then Chickadee, same thing, had those designed with the $500,000 from the general fund contribution last year.
Right.
And then the construction piece will finish that 500 off, plus it will add in some of the sales tax already from last year. So it's kind of a combined number, it changes every year, but it doesn't go away. In other words, it just kind of stays with stormwater. And so just before I came up here today, I think we have about 1.1 million roughly, up or down, in the budget for stormwater projects. In this year's budget, that included that 500,000. And then in the coming years, to the end of the sales tax, we'll add another 1.4 million, so give or take.
Could you send me a copy of the projects that's on deck between now and the end of this fiscal year?
Yeah, I can tell you what those are.
Okay.
And that doesn't include what the crews in the street department are doing.
Yeah, I think you sent us that the other day.
Yeah.
Showed it to us the other day, what the crew was able to do with the extra funds that we put there. But I just want to take a look at the projects that we're about to fund that's going to take up to the $500,000, just to see where they're at.
Sure.
So that if there are some questions about the spending of the rest of the dollars, and to see if it's not to be selfish, but see if there's anything in Ward 4.
And
Because I'm having a lot of concerns in Ward 4.
sure, and
So that's what I
we
want
have
to see.
typically done, I think we'd have the cash flow from last year. The Public Works and Planning Committee kind of looked at a budget for those numbers roughly in February timeframe, kind of for the year, and then and so that's our work plan for the year. So we go about getting the engineering done, trying to get the plans out. That's for the out-of-house bid projects, and that's how we've typically done it. About every February, we kind of go back and look, see what is the biggest need there as far as, something collapsed or, things like that. And so it's a little hard to do, to say, okay, we could, but then there might be something, there will be something come up between now and then that surprises us and we'll have to fix immediately. So that list is a little hard to deal with sometimes.
And just back to this 360,000, I'm still concerned with that number. It really hasn't moved, so I'll be back.
Councilman Mahalovich?
Okay, so I'm trying to get to your math. 360,000 is in the budget through G, and the 750,000 is the estimated value of the work that you gave us, 750,000? Is that where you get to 1.1 million?
We have 235 in sales tax F, 500 in general fund, and 360 in sales tax G for a little, almost 1.1 million.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. 360,000, the previous year with G was what? 260?
360.
360?
The year
then-
we're in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
There was some previous money yet to be spent, 235.
235.
These are round numbers. Then that 500 general fund money.
And that's the 500 general fund that we approved mid-year? Or?
A
Yeah.
year ago.
Yeah, okay. Well, and then that's really, we could report, that 500,000 looks like it bought us $750,000 worth of work, so really.
That's a different number.
We can purport that we have,
No, the 250, has nothing to do with the 500, sorry.
Oh.
This is, we'll have, Britt handed out a sheet.
yeah.
He's still here.
I've got it here.
Handed out a sheet talking about 250,000 where we hired staff
Yeah.
out of that, and material money. Has nothing to do with the 500 we just talked about. That
Okay.
money got you the $750,000 worth of improvements, as Britt noted on his sheet.
So
These
if-
others, that's in-house work
Okay.
on your sheet, and then these ones I'm talking about are what our engineering department will do. They'll go out and something that's maybe too large for this crew to handle. We don't have the equipment for it, something like that. They'll go out and do the engineering and then send that out for bid, and then a private contractor will bid on that and will award that work through the council typically.
Where I'm headed at with this is the total value of work in combination with your budgeted dollars plus the
Yeah.
investment we made in 3 crew and the supplies was estimated to be at $750,000. We're nearly putting in, if my math is right, almost $2 million into stormwater value, maybe not real dollars, based on the report we got the other day, which I don't think is a small sum of change, if my math is right. But don't try to replicate it.
It's fuzzy.
Okay, fuzzy math. Well, fuzzy math is about
I'm
$2
used to
million.
it.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Councilman Hensley.
Thank you. And this is really more a comment about the Transit Division Fund, I think. This will not result in a motion tonight. But something that I'd like to see at least discussed, if not accomplished, this year or in a coming year, is to find sufficient funding to add, right now, an hour to the end of the day for the bus routes. Right now, they end at 6 p.m. Something I've heard from enough sources to make me think it's probably true is that ending at 6 p.m. Prohibits many people who would otherwise take the bus home from taking the bus home, because with the transfers that they would have to take, the buses are already heading back to the garage by the time they would need to be making those transfers to get themselves home. An extra hour would likely be sufficient time to get them home. It costs $800 to $900 per hour to operate our buses, is my understanding. So if you put that at $850, that's about $212,500 additional. That's, I mean, admittedly, a significant amount of money. I think the impact across the city would be substantial. It would allow people who already take the bus to work to be able to take it home. It would allow people who would like to take the bus, who don't currently, because it would not allow them to get home, to make that choice. I think what we lose across the city, not just as a city, but also in private industry and the state as a major employer, is probably lost productivity. Maybe people are leaving work earlier than they're supposed to in order to catch the bus so they can get home. And there are a whole host of benefits to that single-hour extension during the work week that is at least a long-term priority for me. And I look forward to having the discussion with everyone else in the near to medium-term future about how we might be able to accomplish that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, any other questions, comments?
Second.
It's been moved to adjourn and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, passes.
I wanted to get that number real quick from the track phone. How much would the city get again?
It is.